Welcome to Sounding Board, the podcast about freedom and capitalism, as I said. Is that a good tagline?
That's good. Yeah, you should get that on the website.
Yeah, okay, we'll do that. You're going to talk about socialism, and it's the only thing you've spoken about over the last week since we last recorded. You just said, I want to do a podcast about socialism.
I've been hankering for a while to talk about
I can see you've got notes.
I have, so
I don't know any more than that.
Yeah, so I want to do a slightly different angle. We could easily just rant about socialism for hours and the atrocities and the various regimes that have failed, etc., etc.
Yeah.
We've done that a bit in the past. We'll probably do that again in the future, particularly as it's getting. This time is around kind of 30 years since the fall of communism and socialism. So we had the anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall recently. We had the fall of Nicolae Ceausescu on Christmas Day, which we definitely need to do a podcast about that.
Yeah.
And a few other states have kind of got their anniversaries coming up. But the angle I wanted to take today was to kind of relate it back to kind of, I guess, what's happening now. The parties that are, the opposition party, the UK Labour Party, how that kind of relates to all these other types of socialism. And I want to put the boot in, particularly with Labour voters. The people who vote these people in. I've got a few questions for them. So that's the angle I wanted to take on this. And I've wanted to do this for a while, and I'm just
before you start, are we going to clear up very quickly socialism versus communism? Oh, you've got it all here.
I've got
okay.
I've got notes on all this.
Read a book.
Write a book.
Write a book. Go.
Okay, so I'm not
perfect. You've got this all planned.
This isn't going to be one of a Sounding Board Destroys Socialism podcast.
No.
I just want to do like a kind of like a calm skewering.
Sure.
So I thought we would start off by talking about the different types of socialism and what they mean, what they can mean, what people
So you're using socialism as the group term as well for this?
Well, so there's socialism and there's socialism, as we all know. So there are different types. So the first type, the one you hear a lot, is democratic socialism.
And I ask you this every time. I get confused all the time between democratic socialism and social democracy.
Okay, well, then this is the section for you.
Please help me.
So democratic socialism. So the purists can argue that they're for democratic socialism. Now, ultimately, that's
the Socialist Party of Great Britain.
Exactly, those idiots.
Now that I'm on the Twitter,
and
I see this stuff. I mean, they are good for all seasons, aren't they?
I don't know anymore. They've blocked me.
Oh, have they?
Yeah.
Really?
They blocked me. Yeah,
okay.
I asked them a couple of awkward questions. And I was quite surprised. I don't even Christian Niemitz isn't blocked by them, and he is properly skewered them on a number of occasions. In far funnier and cleverer ways than I ever have. But they've blocked me.
Fine.
But they're the guys. So this is the type of socialism that and kind of communism that Marx wanted ultimately. The end state where.
But you introduced communism there. So this is what some would consider communism to be. Real communism.
Yeah.
Democratic socialism and equals communism.
And in its purest form, it's where everyone has a decision on everything. It's completely unworkable, and we'll go into that another time. But that's the end state.
Yeah.
But as we know, Marx advocated for he didn't just suddenly say we can go straight to this overnight.
Yeah. Well, and he also said that you basically had to have capitalism first.
So he said a few things. The first thing was we need capitalism to get to a certain state, and then we can implement socialism, and then move to pure communism over time.
Yeah.
And things would improve, etc., etc. So they're the kind of the pure democratic socialists. You get other people who call themselves democratic socialists, but what they mean, and this is I call this representative democratic socialism.
God.
Okay, but this is like the kind of the Marx's intermediate stage.
Oh, like we have a parliament and the MPs make the decision type.
Correct.
Representative.
So we have so instead of the people owning everything. It's the state owns everything at first, and then so Corbyn is this type of socialist, where he wants to nationalise everything and the state to own everything, and he'll be in charge.
Yeah, but me and my MP friends in this amazing parliament will make the decisions for you.
Correct. That's that type of socialism. It's authoritarian. It's the state owns everything. It's nationalisation everywhere. That's the.
But it's kind of
socialism. But
it's kind of up front with that, though, isn't it? Whereas when we talk about the, in quotes, pure forms of socialism and communism, what we normally talk about is the fact that very, very quickly forms of elitism have to exist that end up in administrative and etc., which means you end up with the authoritarian government, maybe without the representatives, or with the representatives, and you end up at that point. But this is the version which says, look, we've got a government in this country, it's democratic, you elect your politicians, let us on your behalf be as socialist as we can.
And in the theory behind this is that when everyone is working together in the same direction, things will be better. So the theory always was capitalism will get to one stage, we'll then have people take over and plan the economy, and then eventually things will get better, everyone's lives will improve, eventually there'll be no need for a state, it will just wither away, and then we'll get this pure democratic socialism in the end. It's all bonkers.
Can we do an edition on just the term plan the economy?
We can, we certainly can do on plan economies. You mentioned social democracy. That's the third term.
Right, tell me what that is.
Well, that's when I think
is
most
that just
people,
centrism?
I think most people, when they talk about social democracy, because it's quite a nice fluffy term, what they really mean is representative democratic socialism.
Right.
Because social democracy really is, you tend to think of nations, like some of the Nordic nations, where they have a big safety net and relatively high taxes because of this. But in other ways, they're a lot more free. So there's often far less regulation. So the economy is free, but you're taxed a bit more. So it's kind of swings and roundabouts.
Right. So are you talking about the difference between economic freedoms and social freedoms?
Well, no, they're socially and they're economically quite free from the point of view of things like regulation. And
they're highly redistributive.
They are, yes. So there's a huge safety net. But even things like the healthcare, for example, there's often more private.
Yes.
Private healthcare around. Either people buying it themselves, or it's still paid for by the taxpayer, but there's the kind of more private business in there.
What in this country would be called the privatisation of the NHS?
Yeah, I mean, we'll go into again, and we'll go in another podcast. We'll go into that's utter nonsense.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's kind of social democracy. I mean, you've got to be a bit careful as well, because if you look at the tax rates of some of these Nordic states, then it looks like, well, hang on, their tax yield is enormous, but they double count. So what they do is that if I was say you were not earning very much money or unemployed or whatever, you would get benefits from the state.
Yeah.
And let's say ultimately you got £100 a week, for example, take home. They wouldn't say here's £100 a week. They would say here's £150, and we're going to take £50 back that we give you. So they give you more, and then they tax. So it's actually double counted. So £50 of that will be counted twice.
Why?
I don't know. Presumably so they can inflate their figures and cook the books.
How bizarre.
But they deliberately pay benefits more and then take it away immediately.
To somehow enfranchise people or something, so that everyone's paying tax.
Probably. But they do that. So you've got to be
that's
careful.
Very Marxist. But
Yeah. But you've got to be careful when you're comparing tax takes in these countries.
Yeah.
Often they look sky high.
Because that's completely false.
Of course it is.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, you could do the same trick, and you could pay someone 4 times the amount, and then tax people on benefits at 75%, and everything's counted.
Yeah, the point is none of it's in the productive economy, so it means nothing.
It's completely pointless. Yeah, it means the figures mean nothing.
Yeah.
So they're the three types of kind of the 3 most common types of socialism. So I would argue that Jeremy Corbyn and the current Labour Party are this representative democratic socialism.
All of the Labour Party? Are you going to comment on the factional nature of the party? Are you talking about, there is still a Blairite rump in terms of the parliamentary party? Not maybe so much the membership.
Yeah. Okay, so how many are there now, though? I mean, that's like...
You think they've all been converting?
Most of them have.
Just to save their own skins?
Yeah.
The ones that got elected back in this time around.
Yeah, exactly. So even if they are, in their hearts, more Blairite, they're going along with Corbyn, and they have done for years.
Yeah.
And they're in a party that is...
Well, there's no Caroline Flint anymore. I suppose these are the types of people you're talking about. But
and it's like, you have libertarians in the supposed libertarians in the Conservative Party.
Thank you for qualifying that. Yeah.
But then, if you're in the Conservative Party, then you're not a libertarian.
Yeah.
If you're a Conservative MP, I can understand that there are perhaps some interests in the party itself who are libertarians who are trying to generate grassroots movement and swing the party from its kind of current socialist state to more a classical liberal.
Yeah.
I can understand that there are libertarians in there doing that.
Yeah.
The same way that there was the odd libertarian in the Labour Party who paid £3 to
registered supporter, not member.
So that, but I would argue that overall the Labour Party is this kind of, and even the Blairites were quite, they love their nationalisation.
Of course.
To a point. So there's still this kind of representative democratic socialism. They still want the state to, to all the armed forces, the police, roads, education, the NHS. Lots of them want energy and.
You're describing the Conservative Party there as well.
Yeah. I mean, well, yeah. I mean, so there was.
Are you going to come on to the Tories more specifically, or are you just going to put it in the Labour voters?
Well, so I can ask the questions that I want to ask.
Yeah.
Are open and can be answered by both.
Yeah.
I think the way that right wingers and left wingers approach these questions and how they answer them is different.
Okay, understood. Yeah.
So fair. Often when you can tell whether someone's left or right wing by the way they answer a question, can't they?
Yeah.
And whether we talked about it before, where the right are much more willing to look at evidence and outcomes,
whereas the left is about.
All about intentions.
All about
intentions.
Yeah.
The greater good intentions, as we talked about on our last podcast.
Yeah.
And Michael Malice he says that if one of the ways that you can tell someone from the left or the right is that you can ask someone, is everyone born equal? And if you give an answer straight away, you're probably with the right. If you give a speech, you're with the left.
Right.
Because they're just not often willing to just give kind of straightforward answers, and they'll kind of prevaricate, and they'll just talk lots and lots about these subjects without really answering the questions. And I think that's what they do when I'm going to ask these questions. So I would argue that the current Labour Party is this kind of representative democratic socialism.
Yep.
It could be with a view to getting to this pure democratic socialism, the official Socialist Party of Great Britain, way. But certainly they want to move to more nationalisation, and they want the state to own the means of production in this and this and this, and they'll get bigger and bigger and bigger.
Clause 4.
So I guess my main question is, the current crop of Labour politicians, let's say they get in. I mean, it was close in 2017.
Too close.
Way too close. But let's say they got in, and they, for some, by some miracle, they get a reasonable majority.
Yeah.
Like the current Tory majority. Let's say people just have had enough.
Yeah.
So, maybe
gets completely mucked up.
Yeah. And people have enough, and they vote the Labour Party in, and Jeremy Corbyn gets in charge, and John McDonnell is the Chancellor, and they start nationalising swathes of the industry. Broadband, railways, energy companies, and they kind of move further. So obviously the state will get bigger and bigger and bigger, which is what's happened in all these. So and I think the point can be made. This has been tried many times before.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've got Lenin, Stalin, Pol Pot, Enver Hoxha, Mao. They all if you read their early work, it looks like they all had good intentions. You read early Lenin, and it's just like a better written Aaron Bastani. So they all talk about this, making life better for everybody, particularly the workers. But they talk about improving life for everybody, and this is the way to do it. And what happens is obviously that the state gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and then things don't get better, as is in the Marx theory, because funnily enough, people don't like being told what to do. They want to live their own lives and make their own decisions about businesses, and if they work hard, they want to reap the benefits themselves and for their immediate families and for their friends, and they want to do what they choose with their own money. So obviously, what happens when things get bad? In Russia, they created gulags.
Yes.
In Cambodia, they moved everyone from the cities and forced them to work on the farms. And these kind of things happen. So when that, and then people start to starve, and there are, in extreme circumstances, there are kind of sort of mass slaughters, and artificial famines and all this kind of thing. So my question is, when things inevitably get bad, or even even if it's not inevitable, let's say for whatever reason things start to get bad under socialism, under Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party, when he's in power, things start getting bad, and they're not generating perhaps the tax returns that they want to.
I was going to say, do you need to define bad here in a bit more specific terms?
Okay, so let's say it gets more like some of the like the
negative economic growth.
Negative economic growth,
higher unemployment. I'm trying to think of the types of measures that are everyday.
Yeah, or things like perhaps I imagine they would introduce rent controls and price caps and these sorts of things. And then when that happens, goods,
let alone capital controls.
Yeah. So what happens is obviously all the rich people will, all the non-doms will just they'll go away.
Businesses would start leaving.
But businesses will leave. They won't produce certain goods because it won't be in their economic interest to do so.
Yes.
So there'll be scarcities. All this kind of thing, and we've seen it recently in Venezuela. So what would happen if, under their socialist regime, or their kind of their democratic socialism?
Should we say this is 2 years in or something? It takes a bit
2
of
years
time
in or 5 years in or whatever. It doesn't matter. But sometime when they're in power, things are just getting worse and worse and worse. Perhaps we're not starving, but we're on the way to being an impoverished nation.
And things that haven't happened in decades. I mean,
really, ever in Britain, we've never had the extreme socialists like Corbyn in charge, like they have had in Eastern Europe.
Agreed, but I'm just thinking about some of the policies of the 70s and things like that.
Oh, like having to go to the IMF with cap in hand and
3-day
weeks and power cuts and
exactly that.
Right.
I've just been watching the latest series of The Crown, and going through that period of time, late 60s, early 70s, minor strikes and all that kind of stuff. And obviously laws are different now, but that's the kind of thing they've said they want to repeal anyway, and suddenly control is given back to, in quotes, the workers, which actually means the unions, which means etc. 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 So things like strikes and energy shortages. But the point is that was because that was a nationalised industry, and so anything nationalised, you start getting to the point where any of those things you're going to have a shortage of.
So we've got to that stage.
Yeah, it's that's what we're calling bad. I agree with you.
Yeah.
That's bad.
So we got to that stage. Maybe not as bad as like Venezuela is now, but you get to these bad stage. The Labour Party is still in government for whatever reason. Maybe they've won another election, or
it's not
happened
close enough to
it's happened quickly, or they've done. So what's Putin done? Is it today or yesterday?
Medvedev has quit.
Well, the whole
Minister,
government,
which means
basically
the government's
quit. Yeah, because he wants to make some changes that enable him to stay in power for longer, which is
he does every 4 years.
but all communist and socialist leaders do that. They never resign, do they? Look at Castro. Look at Mao.
So this has always been my wife's fear for the current Labour Party and the people at the top that we've been talking about, is, and because she's I'm not going to call her a historian, but she knows her history, and she's a fan of Russian history and stuff like that. So knowing what happens in these revolutions and stuff like that, and getting that once they're in, like it's from my cold dead hands, they will find, as you say, not change the rules and find a way, and her fear has always been they will do something. They will cook the books. They will end democracy. They will do whatever they can to stay in, and that's the fear.
Yeah. So let's assume for whatever reason Labour is still in power,
even if it's not as sinister as one just making it.
Yeah. It could just be they've just won an election and people are willing to give them another chance. But then,
this is an important point. I think. Let's say the Conservative Party puts someone as their leader, someone thoroughly unelectable. To have to rely on the other party or another party to have someone that people would trust. It's a terrible. As far as we're told, we are told as a nation that these are democratic protections and all this kind of stuff, and it's like, don't worry, democracy will win and all this kind of stuff, but you've got to rely on the party machines to do that.
Well, so it's not. I mean, there could be, and there are certain politicians who aren't that bad with their policies, but they just wind people up and they'll never get in. I mean, imagine if the Conservative Party elected Mark Francois as leader,
or Chris Grayling.
Yeah, exactly. So they would never, or Oliver Letwin, or these kinds of people, they would never get in.
Yeah.
So for whatever reason, Labour are in charge. The country is suddenly, we've had an election and it's suddenly now dropping off a cliff. Because they've implemented it's been another first 100 days, whatever, they've implemented another bunch of policies. Everything's going to pot. What do they do? What are these guys going to do in that circumstance?
Sorry, which guys are you talking about?
The Labour politicians in charge, Prime Minister Corbyn and Chancellor of the Exchequer John McDonnell. What are they going to do in that circumstance? Are they going to look at the evidence and think, right, this socialism isn't working now? Everybody can see
they double down.
It's inarguable that it's working. The country's dropping off a cliff. Are they going to think this isn't working? Let's go back to some Blairite neoliberal policies to try and get back to where we were? Or are they going to double down and just going to say more socialism?
Of course they're not going to go back from that. Their answer to everything is more state.
And we know this because both Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell have said that one of the reasons that Venezuela is in the state it is because it's not socialist enough.
In fact, what the other
Richard
thing
Bergen and they all say it.
So shall we list the excuses they'll give? How about it's America's fault?
Oh, sanctions. Yeah. The sanctions have only come in the last sort of 18 months, and it's been dropping off a cliff for 10 years.
Yeah, exactly. Or it'll be someone else's fault.
It'll be the evil capitalists.
Global slowdown. Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, deliberately not making the toilet paper for the people because they want to undermine the regime.
And my point is that in the same way that it all has been tried before, all of these excuses have been trotted out before, and they will use the same excuses that are trotted out in Venezuela and all the other failed places.
I mean, whatever they try, if they can, people always distance themselves from Stalin and from Mao. It's like, no, this is 21st century socialism. This is the new UK. This is Corbynism. This is different because of X, Y, and Z. Yeah. Whatever it is.
Yeah.
Whenever you try that X, Y, and Z and it doesn't work, what are you going to do? Are you going to do more of it or are you going to do less of it?
More of it. The answer to them will be, we haven't done enough yet. We didn't go fast enough. We didn't go deep enough. We only this mix of private and public doesn't work. So we have to be all public. We didn't nationalise enough things. So the only way to go now is to nationalise everything.
And that's my point. And then what happens when people don't like it, or they start not working hard enough, or they want to change profession, or whatever? It's this is when gulags get created.
I was about to say the secret
and
police,
re-education camps, and the Stasi and this kind of thing.
Yeah.
So people always say, well, we just won't get to the violent stage. We just won't do that. Okay, you're at that stage now where the only way to carry on like this you either have
It's
to
put
be
your finger in your ears and say more.
You either have to be violent to force people to do that, and this is when walls start getting built around countries, to keep people in.
Well, then that's another thing, isn't it? It would be people would start leaving the country, and that would be another reason that they could point to for the economic slowdown.
But then it gets to a certain point where you have to keep people in.
Yep.
So you build a wall and you have armed guards and whatever, and people say, well, we won't get to that stage. So you're at that stage. Let's assume you're at that stage.
Yeah.
What do? Do you roll back, or do you have the gulags in the walls and the re-education camps?
Yeah.
And
none of them thought they would need them.
No, none of them. No. Lenin, Stalin, Mao, Pol Pot. They all had these supposed good intentions. I mean, Pol Pot may be a bit arguable, but Enver Hoxha and Ceausescu and people. They all talked. They were all Marxists. They all wanted this kind of democratic socialism, and they wanted it for the people and for the workers. They always doubled down. There's never been a point when when someone has gone, right, okay, you know what, I was wrong. Let's give neoliberalism a chance, or classical liberalism, or whatever. It's never happened. So my question is,
you never moved from the failed start of socialism to that. You're saying there's not a switch from one to the other.
No, not without a change of government.
Yes, but even then, it's probably more likely to do the classic pendulum swing between right and left.
Yes,
as opposed to from this socialism is failing, so therefore go to that more softer neoliberal approach.
Yeah, and you do. So I was thinking about this. This is another thing I was thinking about recently. In that the people, and it's like the current Conservative Party. It's just like a slightly different. It's a better organised socialism.
Yeah.
It's slightly less socialist. I can't imagine the Conservative Party nationalising everything. They're never going to do that. They'll probably do a couple more things. They'll probably nationalise the energy companies. I can see that happening.
This is interesting.
Which
I
is
find
crazy,
this interesting.
but I can see them nationalising, or at least putting severe price caps on this stuff.
You see,
I can see them doing, I think stuff like rent controls as well.
I suppose it was interesting when they did nationalise one of the railway companies, but they didn't just go, right, that's it, the whole rail system again.
Yeah.
I see an awful lot more quangocracy. I see an awful lot more. We just need to appoint an arm's length regulator, and it's about smart regulation. I see that being much more of a right wing thing.
It is, but you still see. So think of all the things that we have classed as right wing. Things like quangos and nanny state stuff and regulation.
Yeah.
Who are the people who are calling for the most regulation? They're in the Labour Party.
Yes.
They're leftists.
Yeah.
Because they're the most statist. So I'm not arguing the Conservative Party aren't that, but the any way that the left can get state control at all, it will call for it.
Right. In which case, yes, that's just power mad. So will they change? I suppose that's the question, isn't it? They certainly won't get rid of the quangos because that's a form of state control. But it's a question of at what point. I mean, you can't plan an economy without state ownership. You just can't. So, in your little counterfactual history here, how far have we got with that? Because to me, obviously bad things are going to happen if you nationalise all of the things you said. But I suppose how deep and how fast that happens depend on how many other things get nationalised and therefore part of the grand plan. Because you don't need a regulator if you just own it. If it's just part of the department.
No, well, let's say they get rid of regulation by nationalising swathes of industries.
Yeah,
and it goes wrong that way.
Yeah.
And the question is, so it's not a question. A fair question could be, well, what would you do you're a Labour voter? What would you do in that circumstance? And some of the Labour voters would say, well, actually, you know what? If that happened, I'd rather we had like Blair in charge again and we have a more Blairite Labour Party. But that's not what's going to happen because those people aren't in charge. Once you've voted them in, that's it. It's game over. It's what they say goes. So once you've voted this Labour Party in, for another 5 years, they're going to do exactly what they want. So the question is, what are these idiots that you've voted in, what are they going to do if it all goes wrong?
Yeah.
Because they're not going to call another election, for sure. Are they going to double down or are they going to roll back? And you know they're going to double down. Yeah. You absolutely know it.
And so in this horrible alternative history, you've got to wait till the next election.
Yeah. So
and hope that they haven't changed the rules, cooked the books, gun to your heads.
Yeah.
Proper sinister stuff.
Yeah.
In order to get in their eyes, legitimate democratic vote, even though it will be far from it to maintain their power.
Yeah. We've realised that the 5-year plan, it just isn't long enough. Yeah. We need a 10-year plan, and therefore we need a 10-year...
We're going to change the
rules so that we have an election every 10 years. So now that we're in, you've got 10 years of us, because that's the way forward. All this kind of thing happens. It has happened, several times in history. So that's the question. And
a new fixed-term Parliaments Act.
Yeah,
15 years.
15 years. And this is another difference between the left and the right.
Yeah.
When confronted with these sorts of questions, the right will try and it likes order, so it will try
to rationalise its way out.
Or it will compensate for things. So, we'll put these rules in, and we'll do this, and we'll assess evidence, and we'll tweak things to make stuff better. It's all the better managers.
But it does tend to be, I think you'll agree, I'm going to add something else to compensate for something that wasn't going as well as I thought.
Yeah.
So I add something over here. Oh, that's going down. Right, so add something over there. Oh, there's something going. Okay, so add something over there. And that's classic. The humongous tax code.
Although they have, like in the 80s, they shrunk the state. So it has happened. It only ever happens under Conservative governments. So and it's probably more likely to happen with people like Sajid Javid and Steve Baker and these kind of people. I mean, probably not Boris Johnson.
We can but hope. I mean, but you see, this is where you say probably not under Boris Johnson, and we are obviously very, very early on. We haven't even yet, in quotes, gotten Brexit done yet, albeit I love the fact that we're merely a couple of weeks out, and from that date at the end of January, and the economy's not tanking, nobody's going nuts.
Pound's doing okay. On roads,
absolute to the highest in 3 years or whatever, all of that stuff didn't happen, but Boris is certainly, pundits like to talk about him and his time when he was Mayor of London, and talk about him being a delegator, being very much not the micromanager. And so even though, and I've said before, I've written blog posts on it, we've done podcasts on it about how he's this ultimate centrist, and how he likes to take from the left and take from the right, and he likes to big up capitalism, but only so that it can pay for our lovely, amazing, wonderful public services and all that. Do you think that there's a chance that the delegator in him will let others liberalise?
I certainly hope so.
Time will tell.
I'm not sure. So, but just steering us back to my earlier point.
Socialism bad.
No. The point about the difference between leftists and rightists. So rightists they'll answer questions and they'll try and work out how to solve this problem. The left just don't acknowledge it. They just don't acknowledge problems at all.
They'll pretend it won't.
They just
change the
wave
stats.
their hands around. They just don't even. So and you can
blame something else entirely.
Well, no. They just pretend it doesn't happen, or just won't even entertain the question. So think about it like when you've got a question like say you're talking about self-identifying trans people.
Yep.
And if you say, okay, so what about if someone, an Olympic weightlifter, self-identifies as a woman for a competition, and smashes the world record. What if that happens? Even if he's just doing it to wind people up, because he's just a git. Let's just say he's doing that, and they just won't answer the question. It's like, and the same can be said of, like kind of prisons and stuff. Well, we can't possibly have these trans women in male prisons.
Yeah.
So okay, so what if a serial wife beater suddenly decides to self-identify as a woman to get in a woman's prison? What happens then? And
But this is
they won't Karen White and these people, but they just won't answer. They won't entertain. They won't entertain that ever.
No, they pretend it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And this is the only way. That's a bold statement, but this is the way. One of the ways that they will let certain bad things happen to try and maintain their concept of right and order and the good intentions. They turn a blind eye to the secret police and to the gulags and to the beatings.
A lot of it is again it goes back to the greater good, doesn't it? Think about the Me Too movement, which kind of started off as as obviously extremely legitimate, and it was there was these concerns that had to be addressed in Hollywood and places.
Yeah.
But then it swiftly moved to just believe women.
Yes.
Don't question them at all.
Yeah.
And hang on a second.
Well, and in fact, that turned into just any victim.
Yeah.
Just believe the victim. Doesn't matter if they say they're a victim, then they must be a victim.
So again, you ask the question. Well, what if someone is lying? What if someone is telling a falsity about their husband or somebody else or whatever, and they would rather that these people would be incarcerated for something they didn't do, because it might catch a couple of real rapists.
Yeah. But again, I have to say, what you're talking about there is Sir Keir Starmer, who at the moment is the favourite to win the leadership of this party. So my goodness.
I know, but there are a few funny things about that. I mean, one, that he's just an utter moron.
Yeah.
The fact that the Labour Party have been...
That's a strong term, considering Richard Bergen is running for the deputy leadership.
Yeah, I mean, he's not the biggest moron in the Labour Party. So Labour for decades have been telling us that they're the party of equality.
Yeah.
And yet they've never had a female prime minister. They've never even had a female leader. They've now got
4 out of 5.
4 out of 5 are women, and yet the front runner is still an old man. It's hilarious.
An old white man.
Yeah. It's just, and a more. I mean, they're all morons.
Is he going to win?
I can see. So if you look at,
I don't want to turn this too much into this. Quick.
So I've had a look at some of the stats.
Yeah, because I've not really looked at.
So Labour members are for him.
Yeah, which I find it really odd.
Momentum members are for Long Bailey. Only about 25% of them, and the rest of them, they're quite evenly distributed. But I think as soon as someone if Corbyn comes out and says Long Bailey, she's going to carry on Corbynism, that's going to shoot right up, and I can see her potentially getting in because of that. Yeah. Because she's just continuity Corbyn.
I've been waiting for something like that. I've been waiting for there to be a shift like that. It seems like she's been, the party machine has been keeping their powder dry on Long Bailey because of just that. I'm sorry, I can't help it. Who is the biggest moron in the Labour Party?
Oh, jeez, now you're asking.
Because
it's such a difficult question.
We've never done this before, but between Bergen.
So there's Richard Bergen, there's Rebecca Long Bailey,
Diane Abbott. She's got to be a contender.
Oh yeah, I mean it's there's some pretty stiff competition here. Who's the other?
Jess Phillips. No. She's
awful, but she's
probably
not.
I'm making
by anybody else's standards, she's a moron. By Labour Party standards, possibly not.
So I'm making an amusing gaffe now because I didn't mean Jess Phillips. I meant.
Are you thinking of the one that I can't remember?
Angela Raine.
That's the one.
But the reason that's funny is because she tweeted she compared herself to someone else who gets mistaken, someone of colour who gets mistaken for someone else of colour, and she said, "Yeah, that's like me. I always get mistaken for Jess Phillips." And then only when being pointed out that might be a little off, then deleted it and then apologised and all this kind of stuff. But ironically, I do get what she means. I forget her name and I just think the other gobby one. I mean, I think this has got nothing to do with race. This is good to do with how many gobby ones there are.
Well,
of a certain age, they're similar age.
So she's not quite our age. She's sort of late 30s, I think. It's probably your age, I think. That
yeah, speak for yourself. In my 30s. In my 30s.
But so I read an article of hers the other day in, I think it might be The Guardian or The New Statesman.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I know.
I like to do opposition research as well.
But and she, she's making arguments against her without realising it. So she was talking about her mother.
Are we talking about Angela Raine now?
Angela Raine. So her mother had her as a teenager when she was like 16 or 17.
Yes.
And the same thing happened to her. So she got pregnant when she was 16.
What a surprise.
And she was saying, well, things were really difficult when my mum had me, which would have been in sort of 80, 81, something like that. But then when I had my child in 97, the state was much better. It's like, who was in charge? Who was in charge in between 81 and 97?
Yeah, where did the improvement come from? Yeah.
But yeah, so definitely in the moron stakes. Not Diane Abbott moronic. There's a proper level of idiocy there, isn't there? But I don't know. I'm possibly.
I don't know a lot of their names.
But then Long Bailey is, and there are bound to be more.
But you see, there's I see Rebecca Wrong-Daly as more just a bit vacant.
But that's surely part of the qualification of being a moron.
Well, yeah,
I mean, she's not all there.
But she doesn't volunteer it as much. She doesn't she doesn't take every opportunity.
She's
to
got
show
that
it.
Homer Simpson like kind of blinking look on her eyes when you ask her like a really basic question, like what are Labour's tests for Brexit?
So maybe my point is there. She's just because she just blinks. She doesn't say as much, and therefore she's just not as funny. And that's the thing.
When she does say stuff as well, it's room temperature IQ stuff. There is so much competition.
Anyway, I took us on to a competition.
Yeah. So this whole podcast was about. What are these people that you're electing into government?
You're talking to the Labour voters now, aren't you?
I'm talking to you, Labour voters. Although I don't imagine there are any of you here. But what are they going to do? What are they going to do when they get to this stage where socialism is failing? What's going to happen? I know what's going to happen. They're just going to double down, and things are going to be worse. So that's my question. You've got to look at what are the people that you elect. What are they going to do when it hits the fan, when things get worse? And you do tend to see Conservative government. I don't like the Conservative Party, certainly not the Conservative Party, but they're nowhere near as bad as the Labour Party. When they inherit bad economies, which they always do, they do at least slowly turn them around, and they don't do they don't do as badly as the parties that they take over from.
But here's an observation: they do better, arguably, when there has been
things are really bad.
Yes.
Yeah.
When
they're forced to
more extreme socialism. I'm not saying we've had extreme socialism. There's another point you've made, because this country is fairly unique in Europe in not having had something like you.
So lucky to not have been born in Poland, Lithuania, Albania, any of the Soviet bloc countries. Basically anywhere else in Europe.
Yeah. And so it's easy pickings, isn't it? When it's that bad, you just free up the economy, you just open the doors.
But it should be easy pickings any time.
But is it? Again, was it just borrowing less and spending less? Basically all George Osborne tried to do.
Not very successfully.
No, but I'm just saying that
was his point.
But is part of the problem that the Blair government, as inherited by Gordon Brown and whatever. It's not like he did anything particularly, other than just spend more actually on him when the going got tough. He reached for the only socialist lever he knew, which was to spend money. Because it was such a regulatory government as well, think of the quangos that came out under the Blair years. That the Tories just didn't want to get rid of any of it. They didn't want to do it. They might have wanted to do, and in fact, a new Communications Act, a new this, a new that. That just change the rules slightly, steer them slightly in a different direction. But obviously that's just tweaking. It doesn't produce these proper spikes in growth that you would get by removing and liberalising those.
Yeah, we had an awful Conservative government.
Yeah, well, okay, and that was partly because it was being propped up by the Liberal Democrats. Yeah. And I've been saving this question, which is, where are the Lib Dems in your picture here in terms of social democrat or democratic socialist and all of that? I think, or are they just opportunists?
Well, so that it's not easy because they try to be all things to all men.
Yes.
In different parts of the country they'll say different things. I think if you had to pick one, it would be social democracy.
Yes.
I think they are a big safety net, high taxes.
Just a penny in the pound.
Yeah. I don't think they would nationalise everything and look. They're not, other than perhaps Vince Cable. They're not really Marxists.
Yes.
They're a couple, but they're not out and out Marxists the way that Labour politicians are.
Do you know what? It's an interesting one, isn't it? We've never done a counterfactual or spun out an idea of what would happen if a Liberal Democrat government was elected. I mean, I can see you wanting to just roar with laughter.
I mean, should we do a Monster Raving Loony Party government as well, while we're at it?
It would probably be more successful. But anyway.
And just as likely.
Have you got any other?
No, that was it. I just wanted to put the question out there to Labour voters.
What the hell were you thinking?
What do you think your leaders will do?
Yeah.
In these circumstances.
You said to me before.
And I guess so. Just the one other thing I wanted
one more thing.
The one other thing I wanted to go, because I'm trying to second guess what people are going to come back to us with, and it's like, well, what if people do what we want, and it doesn't work, or it's not working as well?
Right.
And my argument to that is, one, I want freedom not because of anything economic. It's morality.
Yeah.
And two, if people are free and they don't do very well, that's on them. I'm not forcing them to do anything. If I was a right winger and I was imposing my morals and my values and my standards on somebody else, then I should look up, because if it goes wrong, then that's on me. If people are free and it goes wrong, that's on them.
Yeah.
And as long as they are free, there are more ways to judge a country than its economic value. It may be that there is some sweet spot to get the most economic output from people.
Right.
That
requires a certain amount
of authoritarianism. So if you look at and so let's say if you look at human progress over thousands of years, you can get to a certain point with just brute force.
Yep.
By just having people in fear and forcing them to work hard labour. Think of a few hundred years ago, when the only way to move stuff around was to move it yourself, or maybe get a horse and cart or whatever. So you can get to a certain point. Once economies and nations get like a more advanced, then that's when you need freedom, because you get even more advanced with your brain. So you need people to invent stuff and to make stuff better. Yeah. It's all about ideas. Yeah. So, societies move from just being about hard labour and brute force to having ideas.
Because they have the time for those ideas.
Yeah. So, but you could potentially there might be some kind of sweet spot where, okay, you're not very bright, but you're big and strong, therefore we're going to force you to work hard.
Yeah.
And you're clever, so I'm going to give you the freedom
Yes.
because you're a first class citizen, you're a second class citizen.
Yeah.
You know, you could see that kind of happening.
Yeah.
And that might make
where's the morality in that other than the greater good again?
and that might make the economy grow.
Yeah.
But it's just so immoral.
Yes.
So I'm not saying that this is complete lack of government is the best. It may not be the best economically, but it's certainly the best morally, and people will be happier. You probably find that people will, if let's say the society gets so advanced where people don't have to work every day. They might only need to work 2 or 3 days a week, and everyone's got food and clothing, and they're happy, and they've got all the technology, and stuff's built by robots. People don't have to work. They can have more leisure time. Wouldn't that be great? And the economy wouldn't be as great as if these people were working night and day to just generate more stuff.
Yes.
But they don't want to.
Right now, we could have an economic boost if we worked 7 days a week.
Of course we could. So let's force people to work 7 days a week.
Exactly.
So my argument is, if it goes, if it goes wrong, or if things don't work out as perhaps somebody else would like, it's free. That's what happens under freedom. People are free to make their own choices and their own bad choices.
And free to fail.
And that's often where things get better again afterwards. You think you try stuff out, it doesn't work. Let's try something new. And freedom, people under freedom react so much quicker than they can under a government.
I don't know the details, but obviously it was announced today, the Flybe stuff.
Flybe night.
Where the government has done something. And somebody told me that they had done something across the board, but it was obviously designed to help them because they asked for it. And they're like, so we need to pay all this tax to you, so maybe you could change the rules a bit so we don't. And I mean, I head in hands moment of, oh right, so if you become big enough that you're important and you're paying lots of tax, you get to turn around to the government and say, would you mind, I'm going to go under if I don't pay all this tax. Oh, we'll change the rules for you. I mean, that's outrageous, absolutely outrageous, let alone the fact that bad things should fail. Things that don't work should fail.
I mean, if they're I guess it would, if they're failing because they're just taxed too much, and they changed the rules and said, we're going to lower the tax rate for I mean, ideally it would be great if they lowered the tax rate overall, but if they just lowered the tax rate for a particular industry, that would be great, because the industry would suddenly boost up and think, oh, hang on, if we're lowering tax rates, that works.
Yeah.
Why don't we lower the tax rate for this industry or all industries? So that's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
I don't mind them
doing it. As I say, I don't know the detail. They might have done that.
It's bailouts and subsidies and all that kind of stuff that I hate. If they're just saying we'll cut the tax bill for airline companies, all round, then I'm actually quite fine with that.
Yeah. Well, look, I'm glad that you brought all of it back to morality again, because I don't think we talk enough about the morality of capitalism or freedom or whatever you want to call it, or the small state or no state, and the opposite of statism, which left wing and right wing, Conservative, Labour, Lib Dem, they all are. They're all statists. Something you mentioned to me just before this, and we haven't talked about the detail of this in advance, but you said what you wanted to say was Corbyn and his cronies got let off the hook in the election.
Well, that's another reason why I wanted to bring this about socialism. It's easy to talk about Corbyn, about being like on the side of every single
Jew-hating, terrorist-loving,
dodgy regime in the world.
Yeah.
He's against Britain. He's a massive anti-Semite. Because of all these things, his economic policies have had a bit of a pass. People haven't been concentrating on it, and I've been guilty of this, and I guess kind of rightly so, because these are really important things.
Well, if you're talking morality, they're pretty important.
Well, of course they are, but let's not forget the economic immorality of the entire Labour manifesto, which I had to read for a podcast a few weeks ago.
And the predictable catastrophes that would come out of it, even if all that other immoral stuff wasn't the case.
Yeah, I mean, let's say he's for Britain and he's not a friend of Hamas and Hezbollah.
Well, even if Keir Starmer leading this,
and he's not an anti-Semite, it's still all awful.
Yes.
So that's the point I wanted to make today.
Yeah. Well, I'm with you. I'm hoping that if you've managed to watch or listen all the way through this, then you are too. Thank you very much for listening to Sounding Board. We are on YouTube, where you can watch us if you really want to see us. We're on all your favourite podcast apps, iTunes, Spotify now as well. Please subscribe, please share, please rate us if you can. We have at the moment only 5-star reviews, which is fantastic.
Well, one of them's me.
Don't tell them that.
Of course.
There's more 5-star reviews, please, and tell your friends. Thanks very much for listening.
Thank you very much.